we'll quickly start the demo day for today. And today we have a live workshop, which is about, one of the most ask for pipeline from us, right? Which is Salesforce. So today's topic is about like what breaks in your Salesforce pipeline and how can you avoid it. For this we have Kushagra Deshmukh with us, who's a solutions engineer at Hivo. He's been part of Hivo for a while now, and he's seen these problems on ground himself. So he would be the best person to, help you figure these things out as well. Thank you so much, Kushagra, for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Just a couple of line items before we, go forward. So we have a Q&A tab wherein you can push all your questions, and we'll take it towards the end. We'll try to keep it like a quick 35 minute content piece, and then we'll give a demo in between as well. Shag, we can go to the agenda quickly, and I'll give like quick brief agenda of what we are trying to cover today. So basically, we're going to be talking about how Hivo engine actually helps you do the pipeline effect. Hivo Edge engine helps you create the pipeline. Then, what are the actual risks involved with Salesforce, and why this is such a troublemaker of a connector that we see around, right? Then we'll quickly jump into the live demo, which will be a very quick demo where you can see how to connect your source, which is Salesforce, to your destination. Then we'll go into a case study, which will talk about an actual use case where we have seen these fields actively breaking, and then how Hivo is actually solving that. And then we'll towards the end we'll go on to the questions, and then we'll conclude the demo day for today. So Kushagra, over to you. You can just quickly dive into the content now.
Sure. Thank you for setting the context, Radhika, and hello, everyone. You can see the agenda slide over here, which says introducing the Edge engine, talking about the risks within Salesforce. I'll just start with introducing the engine itself. Uh, So when you log into Hivo, you are actually now seeing a lot of new things, which are not just from a connector standpoint, but also from a core observability standpoint, which have been enhanced. It's purely driven by the new engine, which we call Edge. Now, Edge engine is primarily a batch-based engine, and this is built with the philosophy of, handling errors in a better way, giving you a complete view of how your data is moving, what are the layers of observability that you can have while your data is moving between sales, your source to destination. And we also want to focus on enterprise grade connectors with this engine so that you can actually focus on the larger level analytics, which comes at the downstream, and we handle the heavy lifting of, giving you that data in the most reliable way as we can. Uh, so the webinars to follow also will talk more about this engine. And today the Salesforce connector, it's also in this brand new engine, which I'll show within the live demo. But before moving to the demo, let's talk about what are the risks within Salesforce. Now, Salesforce being API-based source uh, comes with a lot of risks when you are, connecting data and moving data from it within any OLAP or OLTP destination. First and foremost being how do we handle the rate limits? How do we handle the accessibility issues? Typically with Salesforce, because it being an API based source, you have to throttle a lot of API calls to handle different set of objects, different set of records within those objects, feed level attributes. All of these are synced within the API limits that Salesforce has set for you. Organization wide, these API limits tend to stall your pipeline, also, in some cases, lead to incomplete syncs, right? With Hivo specifically for Salesforce connector, what we have done is avoiding all these full refreshes so that you stay within your API limits and pull your incremental data. So all the syncs which you do are smartly scheduled incremental syncs. And there's also a built-in retry mechanism to handle these rate limits so that you can focus on, continue pulling your incremental data and also rely upon our tool itself for, the retry mechanism to stop and start from the place where your, rate limit is hit. I have an example today of the same, and I'll showcase in the live demo. But this is one of the foremost risk with this connector. Now, another problem again, which is like an amalgamation of a lot of things, performance and data inconsistencies, right? Typically, in Salesforce, we rely upon the bulk API for moving in data, and while this API is very powerful and ensuring you're moving those large volumes of data, with the full refreshes on these large objects, every cycle of sync is slow. And as the cycle slows down, you hit your rate limit. But not just that, you also miss a lot of data, which actually is important for your downstream analytics. With our connector, what we have done is we've ensured that we are doing parallel data ingestions. You are seeing job level details of every sync and still using the bulk API for pushing in the large volumes of data from your Salesforce connector. Third, and I would say the biggest, and coming from experience, we have had a lot of customers who, whenever we have a discovery with them that, hey, I understand you have a connector for Salesforce, but how do you handle formula fields? Formula fields are integral to the business itself, right? Every customer, every organization have some level of computation that they want to do on their data, that they do on your data, but they also want that to be reflected in their end result, in their end report, in their destination. With Salesforce, formula fields are typically the calculations that you do using the Salesforce inherent field, dataset, and relevant records. And you utilize that computation for a further business analysis, a more aggregated view of your Salesforce data. But what we have seen, and I would say that we have seen that in our competitors as well, that formula fields are not handled in the most optimal way. The first point being that the changes within the formula field are not tracked. Sometimes the computation itself is stale, so your end report is suffering because of that stale computation. We extract the formula field definition and make sure that you are seeing that in an incremental fashion in every run. Now, how do we do it? It's a very simple three-step process, which is completely working under the hood. You don't have to do anything from your computation standpoint, both from a destination or a downstream analytics standpoint. If you have a formula field created within your Salesforce account, what we'll do is as we read data from your bulk API, we'll extract the formula definition from Salesforce. Then this formula is translated into a compatible SQL query, which is pushed into your destination. And you finally are getting a view which has the complete calculation of all the formula fields that you had created in your Salesforce account. To see this data and the computation, we have created three particular objects. As you can see, Hivo formula, which actually encapsulates what is the logic which you had initially utilized for creating that field. The formula model, which is our computation of how we are actually showing you the output of that formula field. And third would be in case there is a failure within your formula field, what is the reason behind it? Usually, when you create a formula field in your Salesforce account, also you go through a step of checking the syntax, what was the output data type, what is the output view of that formula field. All of that is anyways checked. And in case in those steps where you're actually creating your formula field, if there's any error which needs to be captured, that will also be part of the failure reason. So again, talking about the philosophy in which Edge was built, we want to focus on giving you granular details of how your pipeline is working and focus on complete transparency. If there's an error, if there's an issue, what it is and how can we solve it, right? That being said, I'll just move to the live demo of our Salesforce connector. It's going to be a straightforward demo of how do we connect to our Salesforce account, how do we create the pipeline, and then also look at a running pipeline which already has formula fields, right? Meanwhile, if you have any questions on how you are using Salesforce and what are the problems you are facing within your Salesforce connector, please drop that in the chat box. So let me just move to Hivo. Great. So I have my Hivo account open over here. People who are new to the tool, if you are not familiar with it, these are the pipelines which are running in taking data from a particular source into a specific destination. Like I mentioned, uh, if you're logging in, you'll see the segregation, which is standard and edge being our latest engine. And we already have talked about the philosophy behind why we built it and how are the enhancements working on it. This is the destination section, which is basically capturing what are the different OLAP and OLTPs that you can, actually create for pushing in your data, right? So Snowflake, Databricks, Google BigQuery, uh, Redshift, and even OLTPs like MySQL, SQL Server, all are part of the destinations that you can create for pushing your data. Just starting off with a simple pipeline creation in Salesforce. Like I mentioned, I already have a pipeline created, so I'll just deep dive more on the pre-created pipeline over here. Now, because we are complete SaaS, you'll see these are the varying regions that you can choose to have your Hivo account on. The pipeline creation process starts from this step. You'll see this press create pipeline button. And as I click on this pipeline button, I am redirected to this directory of sources. We have about 150 plus native connectors available within Hivo, and these are again segregated based on the nature of their usage. So you have database file systems where all your SQL based, no SQL based databases will lie. Then engineering and analytics based sources where we have the REST based application, your engineering based sources like Jira, Ops Genie for tracking alerts. Similarly, finance and accounting based sources, marketing specific sources, product analytics, and sales and support analytics, right? This is where our Salesforce connector also lies. So I'll just click on this. As I click on my source, now he was asking me, hey, where do you want to move your data? I already talked about the varying destinations which are available. I'll choose Snowflake in this case. Now, as I click on Snowflake over here, I'm redirected to a page which is called the source configuration page. And because Salesforce authentication works pretty straightforward, you'll see that we have already have a two account segregation. If you want to, connect your production account, you can do that. In case you want to, connect your sandbox, you can do that as well. But before that, in case you are new and you're again starting to create your pipelines, one of the prominent value that Hivo is offering you is how easy it is to adapt. The learning curve is pretty short. So there's a setup guide for every connector towards the right hand side of every page. You can just go along the prerequisites mentioned over there and just follow it step by step, and you can create your own pipeline very easily. So with Salesforce too, it is giving you all the step-by-step notions of what needs to be adhered to and how you can, move your data from a particular source into the destination. I'll just authenticate my production account in this case. Before that, I'll just walk through the last parameter, which is the historical sync duration. That means how long you want to go back in time within your source to ingest data from it. With Salesforce, you can go 3 months to all the available data which is present in your account. So if you want to have a complete movement of all your data into destination, you can do that. Very useful for historical versus current analysis and all type of decision making reports that you need to build out of your sales motion. So let me just authenticate my production account. It will redirect me. I already have a bunch of pipelines over here. So let me, or rather bunch of accounts over here. So let me just choose one and I am done. Now he was giving me a validation that, hey, we have added your account. In case you want to reauthorize it, you can go ahead. I'll just move and configure my destination. So the destination which we selected was Snowflake. So all the Snowflake accounts or Snowflake destinations which already are available in my account will be showcased over here. And I have a bunch of Snowflake accounts to choose from. So let me just choose one of them. It will again ask you for the validation of whatever credentials, whatever parameters that you had given for connecting to a Snowflake account. And similar to your source configuration, your destination configuration is also available in a step-by-step manner. So you can just follow the steps over here and define your destination as well. It's pretty straightforward. You have to choose, okay, which warehouse do I want to utilize for moving data, which is the database that I want to push my data into. Provide the username password. There's also a key-based authentication available, and that's about it. Final piece is how do I configure this pipeline? And this is where our new engine has added a lot of parameters which are very useful as the downstream analytics cycle increases, and the focus is more on how do we push all the available data from plethora of sources within a destination. So first thing is giving a name to the pipeline. So I'll just name it webinar SF. Uh, Giving a prefix. Prefix is very important because this is basically differentiating factor in your destination. So within this schema name, all your tables from Salesforce will move into your destination. So there's a unique identifier in your Snowflake destination with this prefix. Then comes the load mode. Now, load mode is typically of two types. One is the merge technique, which is your classic incremental SCT type technique. What we'll do over here is, in case a record already exists in my destination, it will update with the new information found for it. And if it is not present, it will insert it. So very much recommended primarily for incremental syncs. But if you want to do auditability of your data, right, you just don't want to do a update or upsert rather, you can have a append technique, which will continuously add new records at the end of your data set. It will not modify or delete any existing data. And you can have a complete view of all the records that were added with this append feature. Now, because the engine itself is built, from a principle of how do we become more fault tolerant. There's a failure handling policy currently, visible over here, which will ask you that how do you want to, configure your pipeline in for a failed situation, right? And this has object level settings. So in case you want to do not in case you do not want to load any data or any row, even if there's a failure in one row, if you do not want to load any of the objects, you can choose that. Or in case there are less than 10,000 of fail rows, you still want to load it, you define your policy accordingly. Moving forward, we want to customize it so that user can have a specific failure handling policy depending on their use case. But this is what we have as a failure handling policy as of now. Finally, with any source, and when you're talking about not relying on full refreshes, and talking about incremental syncs, the most important aspects which our customer ask us is how do you are handling the schema drifts. And this is where the schema evolution policy comes into place, where there are three options that we are providing to you. Firstly, allow all changes. So whatever is changing as per your source in terms of tables, schemas, any columns within your existing tables, those will be mapped and replicated in your destination on the fly. Second being, in case you want to preserve, your changes at the source level itself, and probably do not want them to be replicated in the tables that you've already moved, you can block those changes and, have your synced, a blocked sync from your new schemas, tables, and columns, and only go with the existing data which you already moved. Third would be just allowing the column level changes. Now, this option is purely for the new columns within existing tables which are synced in your destination. So, use cases of backfilling your data normally comes into this particular policy. New schemas and tables are not synced. I'll just move with allow all changes. Now you'll see a difference from a general sync frequency situation from a pipeline standpoint. There are two options available over here. One is a scheduled run, which is you defining your frequency of run and your pipeline working based on that frequency. Second option is an external orchestration, wherein let's say you do not have a fixed time wherein you want your data. It is ad hoc, and you have a lot of ad hoc reports which are reliant upon a particular pipeline to bring data. What you can do is you can do a sync on demand in that case, which is using Airflow to trigger your pipeline on demand, or maybe based on a cron expression that you want to specify and trigger the syncs accordingly. In case you want a deeper level detail of how do we do sync on demand, we had a previous webinar which talked about the Airflow integration. So you can always go back to that webinar, and in case you have any questions, come back to us. Now I'll just talk about the scheduled run. One is an hourly run in which you schedule between 1 to 24 hours of frequency, or in case you want a faster data, you can go as low as 5 minutes also in this case, which is again a very new addition of how we want to focus more on giving you the right data in the less amount of time, so that you have your data available in your destination and you focus more on the downstream analytics, which is what your end customer or even your internal stakeholders might require. Finally, an important aspect is giving you an alert on how the data is loading between source, is moving between source and destination, which brings us to a very important parameter called latency, which is nothing but a difference between when the data was ingested and loaded between your source and from your source and your destination. So if you have a specific SLA to follow, typically in mission critical projects, there are specific deadlines, there are sprints to be taken care of. In that case, such alerts increase a lot of governance for pushing integration timelines, and also giving a complete visibility of how your data is moving and how your end report or end output will be dependent. You can have alerts generated based on that SLA, so you know how your data is moving, and is it moving on a specified threshold. In case it is crossing this threshold, you will be alerted. So this was about pipeline configuration. The next step is configuring objects, but because I'm in my production account and it has plethora of objects moving in, the object configuration is something that we can directly show you in a pre-created pipeline. But the penultimate step after this is to select objects and just save your pipeline. I do have a saved pipeline over here already. So this is my saved pipeline. I'll just open it, and you'll see all the different syncs over here, right? The first sync always is the historical sync. These are called jobs in the Edge engine. So you'll have a specific job ID for every type of movement, be it historical or incremental. You'll see, and all the different objects which are available over here would be visible. You can see that we have about 800 odd objects and total about 16,000 rows, which have already ingested and loaded in my destination. And you can have a granular view on each and every object over here. You can see how much time did it take for ingestion, how much time did it take for load, how many total number of events were there which were ingested and loaded. And you can even have filters based on the status. If there's any job or any object within a job which is in progress, if there are failures, if something was skipped, now, and if something was deferred. Now, deferred is a very important point, specifically when we are talking about API-based sources, because we started with a context that Hevo would never tell you that, hey, this is broken or we'll stop the data. In case we are hitting the rate limits, what we typically do is we have a throttling mechanism of, you know, constant retries till the time we meet the limit and ingest the data from that point in time. So no backfilling involved, no manual intervention involved. Your load will be deferred. And right from that point in time, whenever we get the limit access again, we take your data and start moving from that point in time, which is what you're seeing over here in this particular job, which is again an incremental job. I do have a couple of more incremental jobs which are also providing an insight of, okay, these were the incremental events generated. Now for every job, what you can do is you can download a session log for, more governance, tracking what went wrong, tracking how things are moving again at an object level. Talking about objects, we did discuss, okay, Hivo is moving certain level of formula fields. Now, how do we see these formula fields over here? So we talked about three situations, which is, I'll again go back to my slide, which is extracting the definition, translating it into a SQL query, and then finally giving you a view. And we mentioned that there are three fields or which will generate for you to have this output within your destination. Now, what are these fields? These fields are here. So let me just search for these fields. So as I type Hivo over here, you can see these are the formula fields which are typically moving all my computed data from Salesforce in my destination. You can view what are the available details are there. Which field was this calculated on? What was the formula for used for calculating this computation? All of it is available over here. Similarly, what was the model utilized? In case what is the output data type? All of it is available within this specific field over here. And for majority, or not just majority, for all your formula or computed fields, these are the objects that you'll have to rely upon in your destination for a pre-computed output. You don't have to again do the computation. Whatever you have done in your Salesforce instance, we are tracking it, we are using that logic, and we are providing you the right and accurate view of your computation within your destination. And again, I'll reiterate this point. This is something which Hivo itself is very proud of, because none of our competitors are doing it in a way that we are doing it for you. So in case you are having specific problems of formula field syncs, please, I would urge you to try this out. Then uh, from a monitoring standpoint, again, all the activities that we are doing, right from deactivating any object, creating this pipeline, if there was a state change, that means you started with a 2 hour sync, but then you shifted to a 6 hour sync. All of this is tracked in activity logs, and you can further filter it down, see what was the severity of a particular activity, who did it. Again, for large projects, it gives you a great visibility and governance on how things are moving along as your data is being integrated from a source into a destination. Now, in case you want to change anything within your pipeline, that is also doable. Again, you just have to edit the specific aspect from a source standpoint, from a destination standpoint, and even from a pipeline standpoint. Finally, we talk about alerts, we talk about notifications. Now, in case if there's anything which has failed, how are we getting communicated, right? With the whole mechanism of giving you that transparent picture of whatever is happening, we have created granular alerts over here. Now this can be from a connectivity standpoint, this can be from a job failure standpoint, it can be a load standpoint. Any activity which is happening across your account, you can get alerted for it, not just at the UI level, but you can generate an email based alert, you can have a Slack integration, and you can also have a third party tool integrated, something like Ops Genie or a PagerDuty as well. So that you are always aware of what's happening within your pipeline. And you don't have to go on, log in, and just see the error again and again on a timely basis. You will be, given the right alert at the right time by Hibo itself, so that you can proactively take decisions on cases where there's a failure. This was about Edge Engine, how there's a Salesforce connector which is handling a lot of problems within the inherent nature of the source, and specifically formula fields. and how Hivo Salesforce connector differentiates it, being a sheer game changer, specifically when we are talking about the pre-computed data movement from API-based sources. I'll again go back to a case study of a customer who has done this, live and is using our Salesforce connector. Now, this is a leading finance company which utilized the Salesforce connector itself for their financial reporting. The problem was they were building a bureau report using the Salesforce data, and it was a comprehensive report because they wanted to track not just the incremental data for the analysis, but also uh, all the past data. And this company also wanted to make sure this analysis is done on a periodic basis. So the Salesforce data and handling its rate limits was a big problem. They also had a lot of formula fields. So what they were doing is eventually to handle these fields were just mirroring that computation at the destination end. So you have the raw data, you just mirror that calculation at the destination end, which led to a lot of time for them to redo all the operation which has already been done at the source level, and also wastage of compute at the destination end because you are recalculating and adding those logics and running those queries again at the destination end. All of this was not really improving their end output, which was the report they were looking at on a periodic basis, and a lot of data redundancy in just creating a central schema for their reporting. The architecture which followed was them integrating the native Salesforce connector. They also had a lot of OLTP connectors in form of MySQL and RDS MySQL, which was, with Hivo native connectors moved directly into Snowflake, and the outcomes were phenomenal. Now they did not have to recompute their formula fields, and also all the errors, all the places where even their formula fields were cause of kind of causing an error were also being accurately handled. Their entire schema was normalized, so the whole reliability in terms of having a central schema was there. With the central schema and accurate computation of the source formula fields, there was a complete consistency in their reports. So no longer waiting for 2 days just to make sure we have recomputed the source views and then presenting the report to the management. It was or it is rather being done on a more timely basis, and the entire observability piece for which is inherently how the pipeline principle is based on, was also helpful for them to resolve all the silent failures, be it the rate limit and the specific engineering bandwidth which is required again to solve those failures. So these were the outcomes that they could achieve with Hivo. And I'll again, in case you are facing issues within your Salesforce connector or any integration for that matter, I would, as a next step, would want you to, start a trial. We offer a 14 days free trial. In case you want a specific demonstration of how does integration work, we can have a personalized demo with you, and all our recording and resources will be available to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kushagra, for walking us through the Salesforce fields, and how it's generally has become a pain point and how he can solve it. We open the floor for the questions. We'll wait a minute or so and see if anybody has any questions. Now is the right time to ask those. And if not, then we'll be concluding the demo days here today. And don't worry, we'll share the recording and we'll share all the resources that would help you achieve the outcome that the finance company was able to achieve for yourself as well.